I just want to sleep with someone, but how do I not catch feelings? You don't. It's a trick question. You always catch feelings.
In case nobody told you, the real conversation was always behind closed doors. You're in one right now. What is the question that shows up again and again when it comes to sex?
How do I not catch feelings? Yeah.
Okay.
Because most of the time, I have different types of workshops, right? I have Sex at 101. I call it bedroom recipes because my philosophy is it's like a cooking show, right? I'm showing you all the different ingredients.
Yeah.
I'm showing you all the toys. I'm showing you this is the vulva, this is a clitoris, this is a prostate, and how different people have different pleasure. But you make up your own recipes. You figure out what works for you and what doesn't.
Yeah.
So that's why my workshops are a bit different from just a very straightforward sex ed one. I also run a lot of workshops around situationships.
Yeah.
So those are the two popular ones. And, obviously now it's situationships. Before that was friends with benefits. Before that was fuck buddies. They're all the same thing. It's the idea of dating someone or being with someone or looking for casual sex without commitment. And a lot of times people are keen to pursue it or try it out. And who doesn't? It's pleasure, right? But then the number one question I always get is, I just want to sleep with someone, but how do I not catch feelings? Oh, I caught feelings. What do I do
You
next?
can catch feelings just like that, knowing that it's one night stand?
Yeah. To me, it's a trick question. And I always say that to them. I say, because I always start off like, I'm going to answer this number one question. And then the next slide is like, you don't, it's a trick question. You always catch feelings. Then what you have to do is you have to be very, very self-aware about why you're doing this. So your intentions. For some people, they're just exploring their sexuality. Some people will say, I want to get over a breakup. Some people will be like, I'm really attracted to this person. And some will say, I actually want more. And I'm hoping when I get into this, there'll be more.
So behind that question, there's actually multiple factors.
Exactly. So, I always start off like, well, you have to be self-aware. Why are you doing this? Then you have to know your attachment style. Right? I'm anxiously attached. That means once I like someone, I'm checking my phone every 5 minutes. Did he reply yet? Did he put his Instagram story? Did he see my story, my thirst trap? That kind of thing. And I'll admit it. But then there are people who are avoidantly, who are avoidants, right? So there's no, most people are either or they're in the nice middle, which is the secure style of attachment. But if you know what kind of attachment style you are, then it's also easier that once you get into this, let's say you're seeking a casual relationship, you recognize your own triggers. So I'm not saying that if you're anxiously attached, you can never have casual sex. But it's just that I recognize my triggers. Like, yes, if I sleep with someone, and then, like I say, and then I start seeing if he has a new follower, that kind of thing, right? And then I start like spiraling and like, well. And then I know, I'm starting to catch feelings, right? Then what do I do next? Either
block them.
No, that's Well, okay, it depends. So it depends on how you want to parent yourself, right? So let's say the sex is great, and it's just you, and it's like, okay, so either you detach yourself. Don't build this story of, basically you ask yourself, what is the story I'm building? Like, are you putting this person on a pedestal? Or, maybe there should be an expiry date, or maybe actually you really, really just want a partner and so this is not right for you and you need to cut it off. Or the part that actually I tell everyone in the class to do, but no one wants to do it. Or like, it's the hardest thing is sit down with them and say, hey, I like you. I want to know if you felt the same way. And if you do, I would like to pursue this. And if you don't, it was fun. And
Is it just us women who actually introspect and reflect a lot when it comes to this, not to catch feelings, how to, afraid to catch feelings?
No.
It's the men as well.
Yeah. The situationship workshops is one of those that I do mixed genders. I wouldn't say that it's only women. Sometimes it's funny because sometimes women are the avoidant ones. I've had incidents where people are like, I really want sex from this guy, but he wants to be a boyfriend. What do I do next?
I always thought that men find it so easy to talk about it openly with their friends. Is it the case? Or, from your experience, maybe it's not at all.
I would say there's like two camps on this, right? So you do have the men who are more like sexually explicit. And unfortunately, sometimes it happens on platforms that are terrible. They had that whole forum of 63 million men reading about how to rape their wives. So you have that extreme of men who will pursue that. But I do feel that in general, there's locker room talk, right? There's locker room talk, like, yeah, she's easy or whatever. But if you really ask them in terms of when they're with their friends, when it comes to talking about relationships and sex within the relationships, they might not be as comfortable as the women, right? Women will gather around and like, he did this or this. Is this normal or whatever, right? Men may not have that space. And that's when they turn to like...
Is it because everyone's supposed to be like alpha, everyone's supposed to be performing, but yet in the locker room, they're afraid to talk about it?
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if that's it. I mean, again, I'll admit, I'm generalizing, right? Until we ourselves live in that experience. But from what I've encountered and from the questions or comments sent in, a lot of men do write in saying that they actually turn to me because they don't have anyone else to talk to. And I'm like, I'm a stranger on the internet and I'm not a man, right? So I also don't know if that's part of like the like sliding into my DM kind of thing, but the really genuine ones, they almost become friends. They'll actually update me about their love life. I had someone who started off writing to me because he was single and now he's engaged. And I mean, he'll still like, whenever I post something, he'll like, haha, and maybe just make a sex joke or whatever. But he's happily in love with his fiancée, right? But I feel, to me, it's again that idea that they don't have that in real life and they didn't feel comfortable enough, because also they still do, not just sharing their stories, but they do ask me for actual information. A lot of the questions I always get from guys are, what sex toys should I use with my partner?
Very specific.
I'm in a long distance relationship with my partner. What can I get? How do I get this through customs? I mean, to a certain point, I almost feel like, maybe I should have set up some like FAQ on my site, right? I get all these questions all the time.
Yeah. What is considered safe space?
Not being judged. But not just that, like whatever is revealed does not go outside whatever space there is, right? And that's something that I always emphasize whenever I run a workshop or like when people confide in me. That's, I want to say, is the bare minimum. But safety also in terms of the actual, how legitimate the space and resources, right? You could have a safe space in your girlfriend, but if she's getting her resources from like porn or like, it's still technically not really safe. So
do you think it is safe to talk about it openly with our partners as well? Or not necessarily?
You would assume your partner would be your safe space, right?
Yeah.
So again, going back to the feelings of being seen, being heard, and not being judged. Unfortunately, and I've seen it happening in a few of my workshops, they do admit that they can't talk to their partners about it.
Okay.
Because of that very dynamic between them, right?
Yeah.
Because when you're with a partner, that's the person who knows all your vulnerabilities, all your weaknesses, right? And on good times, amazing, right? And on bad times, we're all human. Sometimes it's used against us. It becomes like, and this is interesting because it's something that I've been thinking about lately. Sometimes your partner, let's say, wants to give feedback, right? But the other side will interpret it as criticism, right? Or like, I'm not good enough, or why are you always doing this to me? And it becomes not just the dynamic between the two of you, but it's also, what are you projecting? And what exactly is going on within you as well. So there's a lot of different areas in play. So I want to say the short answer is your partner should be your safe space, but the longer, more nuanced answer is that it also depends on your own self-worth and the stories you're telling yourself too, between you and your partner.
What are those typical questions or typical message that you receive?
I don't get questions as much as I get DMs thanking me for the work. Or I read this article, it resonated. I went for this workshop, I felt seen. And I feel like, and that's whether they've met me before in real life or they're really just reading my essays. To me, it points out that just talking about it. Do you know what's the most viral or the most like read essay on my blog? It has nothing to do with sex.
Tell me more.
It was actually, I wrote this piece like almost really early on, and it was actually the kickstart to, because when I started a blog, it was very educational. Like 3 ways to not have painful sex, or talking about periods or whatever, right? Toy reviews. It was great to have the information out there, but it was one day I had a really great first date, or so I thought. And I was like 35 back then, and and I'm already like thinking like, oh no, I need a ring soon, right? And then at the end of the date, and I thought everything was going well, and then he's about to send me off, and he's like, let's stay in touch. Okay. And that's like, I feel like that's like the death knell, not just like even like professionally, right? Stay in touch is just a nice way of saying, yeah, you're not gonna see me, right? Yeah. So sure enough, after that, like I got like a little like, oh, I had a wonderful date, blah blah blah. Silence. Next day, he's like, hey, I had a nice time, but we're not really feeling it. I cried. And then I was just like, what is wrong with me? Because like, it was just a date. And, and I'm preaching like, people have boundaries, people have tastes, respect. And then, but I decided I'm gonna write about it because I saw my therapist, and then she was going through the emotions with me too. And she was just like, well, you fell in love with the potential and you fell in love with the story. And as much as it was so embarrassing to admit it and so revealing, I decided, fuck it, I'm gonna just write it. And I posted it. And that's up to now still my most read essay. And the funny thing was, I was with one of my best friends, and he said, you know what's funny? I had lunch with another friend, and we don't know each other, right? And she's like, hey, I need to show you this link. There's this really great essay. It's the story of my life. Your blog. Yeah, it was that same essay. And that was the moment that I'm like, oh, maybe it's not so bad to reveal the vulnerable stuff.
Whenever people ask you any question, do you notice, is it mostly a knowledge gap? Or is it because there's so many misinformations, inaccurate information out there? Or is it something else entirely?
I would say a gap, closer to a gap, because my audience are those that they come to me because they're experiencing something and maybe they feel it's not right, or they're uncomfortable, or like they feel like, but I'm not sure if I'm not sure if I've had an orgasm before, that kind of thing, right? And then,
or whether is that an orgasm?
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So a little bit of a knowledge gap there, but it's perfectly valid, right? Because it's not like we're in bio class and like an orgasm feels like that kind of thing. And when you watch porn, which is the only other like sex ed out there, right? You just assume, okay, orgasm means I'm screaming my ass off, or like, I'm squealing like a Japanese porno. Misinformation, I would say, maybe in terms of like when they're talking to friends. Okay. Or to me, misinformation would be like really just watching porn and assuming it's like that. Okay. Yeah. To me, so because they don't have anyone else to talk to, so they take references from the not so great places, right? I'm not like hating on porn. Like the good stuff is good. Right? But if you're using it as an educational tool, that's where it gets a bit tricky. Yeah.
And the reality, the expectation versus reality.
Exactly, because then what happens is that sex becomes a performance, right? And that's something that also is talked about a lot in my classes, because I'll have questions from people like, I did this in my with my partner, or my partner expects this, and what I always get, and I know it will come right after, is this normal? And to me, it feels, I would say it feels sad, but it also feels like we're still putting things into very binary, like, is this right or wrong? Is this normal? Not normal, kind of thing. And a lot of that is, because we don't know. We don't know what we don't know, right? Yeah. But it's also still the idea that being a good girl, being a slut, being a whore, you know, being a pervert versus like people have different kinks and preferences. And then that's why I'm such a big advocate of like, let's teach everyone everything and let people figure out.
Or when you come to the recipe thing,
yeah,
is it?
Yeah,
Okay,
and like
I understand.
Let people figure out what works for them and not. But it's still the number one rule, right? Don't harm yourself and don't harm others. I try not to impart a value judgment on it.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah. So it's not like, you know, choking is wrong or whatever, right? It's like, if you want to do choking, here's the safe way to do it. Like grasp to this part. Don't, you know.
I cannot imagine how can they not like understand that a certain type of choking is not safe.
No, but because again, they watch porn. They watch porn and they assume, okay, to be choked is like grab it. But then there are actually points that you're supposed to hold where it is still safe. You're not crushing someone's windpipe. Things like this, again, not really in like normal sex ed. Oh, again, I use the word normal, right? But not in mainstream sex ed.
I learned something interesting through this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like even something like restraints. You know, I have friends who are shibari experts, right? Shibari is Japanese bondage. And even in classes, he always teaches about safety. He teaches about like you have to be careful where you tie because if you hit certain nerves, you could paralyze the person. You can produce nerve damage, right? If you just look at a forum or go on a porn site and you're just like, okay, I can tie, I can do that too. I can do a sailor's knot, whatever. That's where injury happens. That's the whole like bad side of, you know, being repressed and stuff. But it also makes me quite heartened because men and sex toys can be a bit dicey because most of the time they assume a toy is to replace them or like because there's something lacking in the bedroom, or it's like again going back to how, you know, talking about safe spaces and partners, even giving feedback like, you know, let's bring a toy in the bedroom. Men would kind of have a wall up and like, are you saying I'm not good enough? Are you saying I'm not pleasing you enough?
Won't that apply to women as well?
Men don't really ask for women for sex toys, at least when it comes to relationships, because to be honest, most men are like, I have my hands. Why do I need a toy, right? Women, just anatomy-wise, like only 20% of us can come through penetration, right? So, and most of us need clitoral stimulation to achieve orgasms. Easiest way to do it is with a toy. But because we're all not trained in that, or we're not taught that in public schools, right? Like, who cares about pleasure, right? It's all very functional. It's all very biological. Everyone comes from different cultures, beliefs, experiences, orientation, etc. And just for this brief moment in time, I'm asking everyone to put it aside. So that's why I never really get into like, are you married? Are you single? Whatever. But what I do start usually with is I'll get everyone to kind of close their eyes. And I do ask a series of questions that will help me calibrate whatever I have to say next. So I don't want to go in assuming things about people. I want them to also feel safe. I also want them to get ready for potential topics that might come up. So I'll ask them, you know, close your eyes, make sure everyone's know that, you know, no one else is seeing it. And I say, you know, if it's a yes to this question, raise your hand. So then I'll go into, I've had sex before. I had penetrative sex before. I've had oral sex. I've had anal sex. I know what an orgasm is like. I know what turns me on, what turns me off. And based on that, so that's why, like, even early on when I said some people don't know if they've ever had an orgasm before. One of the reasons why that question is actually something I bring up is because it is something that gets asked at workshops. And that is something that even my own friends, those who have been married, those with kids, have asked me secretly, like, you know, like, actually, how does it feel like, right? And that's why I don't want to be like quick to like, what do you mean? Or like, you know, oh, if you have to ask this question, it means you've never had it. But everyone experiences things very, very differently. So in terms of questions, maybe what I'll ask is, are you in a, I am in a relationship right now, or I am single. And that's the extent. But I won't be like, are you married or whatever? Because at the end of the day, it does not affect what I'm teaching. Because it's still how well do you know your body? How well do you know your partner's body?
More
right?
focus on the
More
topic
focus
itself.
on that. The only time it comes up is if the attendees themselves bring it up.
Okay.
They'll say, I've been married for a while, things look different, how can I spice it up? Or my body's going through changes, so I just given birth, things like that. They volunteer the info, but otherwise I don't necessarily have classes around specific just for them.
Building a platform around a topic people are still embarrassed by means you become face of something people associate with judgment. What does that actually cost you personally, professionally, socially?
My love life, my lack of. Just as an example, so my last essay was actually not about sex. It was actually called This Wasn't the Plan. And it was to explain why I took an absence of almost a year from writing. And I start off talking about because I thought it'd be funny to write about how I'm Houdini and my escape plan was I spent last year traveling. And it was out of nowhere, just by happy coincidences that I was in Hong Kong, I was in Germany, I was Switzerland,
You
KL.
went to New York as well, right?
I went to New York, and it was the joke I wanted to write about was I ended up on this world tour, but it was a world tour to find myself and figure out life. But then as I'm writing the piece, I realized it was very me. Look at these wonderful places, but boo hoo hoo, I don't know who I am, and it be I'm writing it and I'm feeling annoyed with myself. So then that's when I'm like, okay, no, what is the point I'm trying to make, right? And at the end of it, I decided, even though it was something that initially I was just I was going to go to the grave with this secret unless I get super, super famous, was that immediately after I quit my job and I kind of panicked because I actually didn't have plan B. Plan B was jumping into the blog. But it takes a while to monetize writing and all of that. And so my quick fix was I'm going to go to the warehouse of Shopee. I'm going to pack orders for 5 sales. And I get in, get out, get paid, at the end of the night. And that's it. I'm I'm going to go in, night shift. No one's going to know me. No makeup, incognito. And very few people know that. My best friend, maybe another friend, those who I was safe, going back to the safety, right?
Yeah.
And no judgment. And this just happened last year.
Oh.
And it was still my big secret until I'm writing this essay about, I'm jetting off here, jetting off there, I'm meeting old friends. But, every conversation I had with a friend was also me processing my life and where I thought I'll be and where I'm not, right? Or where I am. And I end off the essay saying, and you know what? I was just about to go off to Germany and realize, shit, I don't have enough money. So I ended up at Shopee. And the rest of the essay was this experience where I had tried to play it off as, so it is going to be a funny story one day. I'm going to be on a talk show and talk about this. All those famous actors who are waitresses or whatever.
Yeah.
But I do end off I start spiraling into a story of some of my education wasted, as my old job laughing at me, whether my old boss sees this or whatever, and start spiraling into self-worth. And then also start spiraling to no man will ever want me, and it has nothing to do with what I'm actually there, but it's related to my other topics about sex and whatever, because it's still self-worth. It's the stories you tell yourself, right? And I ended off with a cliffhanger. So part 2 is coming.
Yes.
Part 2 is coming.
Stay tuned.
But yeah, so those are the things that when I write, I need to consider. So it's not easy in terms of that.
Of course. I used to journal a lot, but that was when I was a teenager.
Yeah.
Ever since that, I don't know how to write and start writing. And when I write, I find myself rambling as well.
No,
is this a negative book? No.
Yeah. No, but it's good. So apart from the sex workshops, I do run journaling. I run journaling.
I attended the workshop together, remember?
Yeah. All you have to do is sadly look at the comments on the Straits Times article. anything to do with sex, anything to do with
That's true, actually.
like, this is a really sad case, and I don't know, like by the time this goes up, there was that unfortunate lady who got raped twice in a single night, right? Where she went out, she got taken advantage of because she was drinking, and an hour later someone else came in and she thought she was going to be saved, and he raped her. The comments on that were, she deserved it, why was she drinking?
Yes.
And worse, they were making fun of that. They were making fun of the men. They were saying like sloppy seconds, all that shit, right? And you read it and your heart breaks for her, but your heart breaks also like these people writing the comments are people you live with. They're your neighbors. You don't know. Maybe they're the people you meet in the street. It might be your colleagues. You never know. And we're going back to the safe space. One-on-one, we're fine. Right? You can tell me your secrets, I tell you my secrets. But when we're in a collective and a group, like sometimes I get asked, aren't you ever worried about backlash? You're a visibly brown woman talking about all of this, right? And it's very easy for me to say like, oh, I don't care. I don't subscribe to like rules. But I also know maybe it'll affect my family. Maybe, there are some boundaries that I do have to set up, not because I don't want to talk about it, but there's repercussions for the rest of people surrounding me.
If there is one conversation you wish people would stop avoiding, not about sex specifically, but what sits underneath it, what is it?
I would say shame. The idea of shame and that we have to hide certain aspects of our lives from other people, right? So obviously it plays a big part in sex. But let's say we take the sex out of the equation. So, and I've been hinting at it during this interview is like, there's shame about success and finances. There's also shame about the milestones and where you thought you'll be, and that's not really the plan anymore, right?
Life is not linear.
Yeah. And I feel like, you have the very like toxic positivity, YOLO, like eat, pray, love kind of style stuff, which is great. But, it's still something that the privileged could do. So I feel like a lot of people actually want to talk and share about this, about their struggles, about their day-to-day. But shame is the thing that kind of just keeps us a bit isolated. So I feel like if there's a conversation that I just want people to start, or at least...
And to normalize that, talking about it.
Yeah, just admitting And I find that in my life, I have zero qualms talking about sex and body parts and love and stuff. I might have hesitations talking about other stuff because there is no one safe yet for me to talk about this. People can just remember that we're all feeling the same things, maybe different degrees, different priorities in terms of like where we are. But it'll make us feel less alone.